Michael Covert is a businessman, a Beaufort County council member, a man of God, and he's conservative. Now, he wants to run for the 1st Congressional District to represent the folks along the coast of South Carolina. I sit down one-on-one with Michael for a special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. And of course, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Michael Covert, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
It's an honor to be here. Truly is.
Thank you so much. Obviously, you're a councilman down in Beaufort County.
Correct.
But now you want to become the next congressman to represent the 1st Congressional District.
Absolutely.
And from what I read just recently, Drew McKissick, obviously the South Carolina GOP chairman, basically says, hey, winning back the 1st Congressional District is a top priority. Why is it a priority for you?
Well, it's a priority for me because the 1st District has been represented well over the last 30, 40 years.
Okay.
And the ideals, the values of this district resonate with the Republican Party, and even more so, they resonate with what I have to bring to the table. As a businessman, I've been through those trenches where I've had to write a paycheck. I've had to worry about payroll. I've had to worry about my employees, of which we've had hundreds over the years. Worry about them on a personal level. Make sure their children had gifts at Christmas and so forth. That's what separates me from the rest of the field, first and foremost. And that's what this 1st District, the 1st Congressional District, is deeply rooted from all ends of culture, all ends of socioeconomic makeup. And the residents and the citizens and the tourists, etc., they need someone that can talk with them, not to them. Understand them, not to be understood, but to understand them. That's what Mike Covert's all about.
You talk about obviously separating yourself from the other candidates, Nancy Mace, Kathy Landing, and whatnot.
Right.
Obviously, you have Joe Cunningham as the current congressional person. How would you separate him if you were to be elected to Congress?
Well, Joe Cunningham is everything, at least politically, that I am not. I am obviously a strong Christian constitutional conservative. I do not align with democratic or socialist, liberal, progressive policies. That's just not in my makeup. I am very conservative in my thought process. Joe Cunningham has proven to be a Pelosi Democrat. He preached the low country over party when he ran for the office, but yet we haven't seen that. And while I'm sure Joe is an awesome fellow personally, I wouldn't think anything otherwise. Politically, he is not, again, portraying the values and the necessities and the wants and concerns all over this district. And that's a huge, huge difference. Joe's never had to write that paycheck. He's never had an employee to worry about. He's never had a business to run. I started a business from ground zero as an entrepreneur, and in 13 years grew it to a $10 million a year 2-state operation. And while I'm not tooting my horn, but there is something different with that. And to be honest with you, Quintin, when you look at Congress, in general, the overwhelming numbers of folks in Congress don't know what it's like to wake up on that Wednesday morning at 4 o'clock. And for 13 years, that's what I did. Worrying, okay, did payroll have to come from a credit card? Was it in the payroll bank? Do I need to transfer? That's what someone who understands people and can talk with people, not to people. And that's what separates myself from all the rest.
When you're talking to people in the 1st Congressional District, what are they telling you the needs right now, those values?
Great question. And, you can look at polls all the time, and polls only give you what was on the other end of the phone. But I love talking with folks. And to be the best time I have is Defusky Island.
Oh, yes.
When I've gone to Defusky, and there are some awesome people over there who just want to be understood and will tell you everything you want. Along with Mount Pleasant and Charleston and Beaufort, etc. But when I talk to folks like on Defusky, natives, people who've been there for centuries,
sure,
they worry about the economy. Will we have a job? They worry about, oddly enough, immigration. Is the country being overrun by the anti-immigration populace? They worry about taxation. Is the government and the state becoming too tax heavy? Which all of that falls back into all of my platforms, and they start with the federal government is too big. When you look at the Constitution and the founders of the Constitution that framed that document, sure, nowhere did they want to have, and glad to see you here on the wall, right. Nowhere in that document do they say the government is to be all-powering. It's au contraire. Limited government, limited size, scope, and service, a defined parameter. But the government is best when it's at the closest level to the people, local, county, municipality, and state level. So those things, that is what the folks are telling me that they're really concerned about.
How concerned are you about immigration now?
Well, I think it's a huge problem. First, let me frame my answer by saying that the United States is a land of immigrants. Sure. We all practically came from somewhere. My ancestors came from several places. There's a difference between immigration and illegal aliens. You can't, those folks who come, and I'm going to frame this in the reference of our southern border, those folks that come across illegally are not illegal immigrants. To be an immigrant, you have to do it in a proper fashion. They are illegal aliens. To back all that up for a second, the word illegal should stop there. It is illegal to come across our border without proper documentation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That is illegal, so that should be stopped. I am in favor, Quintin, of a solid border to keep our country sovereign. Our borders need to be sovereign. Aside from illegal aliens, aside from that, the amount of heroin, fentanyl, still cocaine, marijuana, etc., coming across that porous border, not through the port of entries, but through the hills and the deserts and the rivers, is killing America. We have to act to that. Also, the amount of human trafficking is unbelievable. Sex trafficking of children. It's completely disgusting that's going on. And yes, there are problems in those folks' own countries. Okay. I get it. Needs to be addressed and talked about. But we need to keep America first. And we need to have a sovereign, solid border to keep our homeland free. I didn't even mention the fact that there is proof that folks from all across the globe that are involved in terror organizations have been coming across the border. Now, I don't know the numbers exactly of that, but if it's one, just one, that's one too many. We're in a different time in our lives now, where, when I was growing up, you never heard of the word terror. Was Halloween going through the house at the fire department. That was terror. We're in a whole other world now, so we've got to change how we're thinking and react proactively to that. And one way is with a solid border.
Let me get back to that. How do you be proactive and engaging when it comes to our economy?
With our economy, as far as the border, or?
Oh, well, you can talk about that as well.
Okay. Well, first of all, we need to be a free market society. I thoroughly believe in free market. I'm not a tariff guy. So when we hear lately, past several months about tariffs this and tariffs that, I am not a tariff kind of guy. So letting the markets run themselves, so to speak, a free market economy will bloom and prosper. That is suffice to say with the health insurance issues of today. The same with manufacturing. You go right on down the line. If you take the handcuffs off of the public, the private market rather, take the handcuffs away, let the free market flourish. Let those entrepreneurs, let those workers do what it is that they do, and let them do it well. The market and the economy will continue to rise. Right now we have the lowest unemployment rates in every economic system of the country.
Okay.
The GDP is consistently off the chart. We're approaching, if we haven't hit already, 27,000 in the Dow Jones.
Right.
So our economy is working. Our economy is, people are working. Now we need to open up the free markets a little bit more, being proactive to even increase the health of the market and the economy.
And you talked earlier, obviously, about the southern solid border.
Mhm.
What is your definition of that?
Well, I think everywhere is going to be different. I am in favor of, if it's a wall, if you want to call it that, you want to call it a barrier, a physical barrier, a fence, whatever the flavor of the day is for the verbiage, but a defined sovereign border. Right now we have the wall, in different fashions as far as from what I can tell. And yes, I'm in favor of that.
Let me get back here to home. Obviously, this is some developing news that affects really your area right now. And this is this. DHEC says no permit application for seismic blasting. When you hear that, where does your mind go to?
Well, first of all, with the seismic blasting, that whole issue, that, by the way, Joe Cunningham, it's like he went to the races and bet on one horse. And that was the no drill, no seismic blasting horse. And he did a good job at that. However, there's a lot of other horses in the field. And those horses are represented by me. But when it comes to the seismic testing and all that, here's where I feel. First of all, the United States federal government needs to not be in that business. There's a lot of other businesses they need to get out of. And one is that. The states, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, they should decide. And if their folks don't want it, then so be it. If their folks do want it, then so be it. So here's the deal. On the edge of our beautiful landscape, out to from the shore, high water mark, I believe it is, out to 3 miles is state waters. 3 to 200, I believe it is federal waters. So you have heard over the last year or so, the mayors up and down the coast, the state legislature, they all said, overwhelmingly, we don't want it. Went to the House and the Senate in Columbia. They debated it and decided we don't want it. The governor signed it. We don't want it. So that's an overwhelming response in letting the states dictate what the people want. So, and the federal government needs to abide by that. So what happens from 3 miles to 200 miles? The federal waters. Quintin, I still believe that the federal government, if we're going to do what we are supposed to do, the federal government needs to listen to the states. If South Carolina has said we don't want drilling and LNG facilities and infrastructure for LNG and blasting and all that, the federal government in their waters should abide by that and take that into consideration. You see, it's not an opinion of what Mike Covert wants. It's not that opinion at all. It's the people. I represent the people, and overwhelming majority has said we don't want it. Well, it's not my opinion or Joe's or Nancy's or anybody else. It's the people's opinion. The people have spoken. And, recently with you mentioned DHEC, all of these good things are happening that the people wanted. They said, hey, we don't want this. And with the recent announcement, that just solidifies that, DHEC said that the applications aren't in line with everything. And the state is handling it. It's awesome. Let's let the state be what they are, and they do a fine job at it.
Let me take you to the census, 2020 census. Obviously, the citizenship question is coming up. And I know Congressman Joe Cunningham told one of the local stations this. He says he wants to make sure census information that it is not used to continue redrawing for political purposes or gerrymandering.
Right.
When you look at the census for 2020, what do you want to look at?
Well, let me first say that Nancy Pelosi framed that answer for him very eloquently. And I'll just leave that there.
Okay.
When I look at the census, and let's pull the layers of the onion, peel it away, and let's look at the heart of it. That question, overwhelming numbers of Americans, and this has been all over the news and the internet, are being asked this, and their answer is, that wasn't already on there? And so what does all that mean? When I look at this from a very layman-esque attitude, just like my neighbor, just like anybody else. That's a common sense question. Are you a citizen or not, or however it's worded, of the United States? Why would that not be on there? And, it's not about gerrymandering. Yes, that's an issue. Absolutely, that's an issue. That's an issue on both sides of the aisle. I don't think anybody's debating that. But this question, are you a resident or not, is not already on there. So I'm going with the side of the people, and I happen to agree with them. That's a common sense question to me that needs to be on there. Having people here who are here illegally vote seems kind of silly. I would not think that if I drove into Mexico and just took up residency, that come election time they would allow me to vote. If I'm there illegally. So I can tell you, in Europe, when you go, it's so easy. It's like going from county to county or state to state between countries. There's no way that would happen. That's a silly, absolute asinine question that someone would present. So, for unfortunately in Washington, it's being turned into this political partisan, almost joke session that we are arguing whether or not this should be on the census. Now, obviously, the courts will do their thing. I would assume President Trump would probably come up with some sort of an executive order, but we'll see what happens. But to answer your question, I think it makes common sense that it be on there.
You talk about Washington. When you go up there, for instance, right now, what are you seeing?
Well, interesting enough, I've been there 3 times since I announced, and I've been summoned there next week for 2 days by 2 members of Congress. When I go to D.C., I see a lot. I see a lot of confusion. I see a lot of concern that the way things have always been is not the way they are now. The apple cart was turned upside down back in 2016. It was a different way of, when President Trump was elected, that was not the norm. That was not the established politician, groomed from a young person to take office. Totally different. So there's still a lot of concern. I have met with both Democratic and Republican congressmen from our state and other states, and it was interesting. I had a Democrat congressman, high-level congressman, told me, we were talking about earmarks, and he said, the days of earmarks are long gone. I can't promise you, or whatever, money for certain objects, or subjects. That may not be a bad thing. So much of the people back home talk about transparency and poor visibility between their from the constituents to the congressman or the senator or whatever. Well, maybe getting rid of those earmarks where you could just dedicate funds because of you knowing somebody or something, that may not be a bad thing. So it's interesting in DC right now.
Okay.
There's energy, there's some confusion, but I enjoy my time in DC. I love talking to folks from both sides of the aisle. I have made some friends in Congress and the Senate. And the 2 that I'm going to talk to this coming week, I hope to earn their trust and their wisdom in seeing me push through.
Where is the energy for the 1st Congressional District right now in your mind?
From the people.
Yes, sir.
Well, I will tell you, I went to all of the county party reorganizations in the spring. I will say the most energy was Charleston County. They had their reorganization party meeting at an elementary school, and I don't remember the name of it. There was probably 400 to 500 people there. It felt like the governor came. Right. I have not been in a room of Republicans that had that much energy. There was a new county chair being elected. Sure. It was just a lot of energy, a lot of, hey, we are going to become grassroots activists. For far too long, we've let the other side be the activists and work the streets and so forth. Now we're going to do it. So that was awesome, and I left there charged. Now since then, I've gone to several meetings in Dorchester County,
Yes.
breakfasts in Berkeley County,
Yes.
and in my own county.
Right.
That's starting to catch on a little bit. There's a little more fever. We've got 3 or 4 candidates in this congressional race right now.
More to come.
More to come. Sure. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. People are starting to see there's care.
Okay.
There's concern. There is someone, I think when they look at me, they say, there is someone who understands what we go through. Not a typical lawyer. Nothing against lawyers. I've hired many of them in my day. Someone who is not the usual. Someone who is anti-establishment, understanding business, understanding the human value, people. And that's really what it's all about. Understanding people. And again, that separates me from the rest of the field.
Earlier, you talked about the differences in the first congressional party, my district, that is 30 years ago. Okay, what is the biggest difference between 30 years ago and right now?
Well, I've only been here 25 or 26 years, so I don't really know that. But I think as the state has changed. I think Charleston County, Mount Pleasant, downtown has probably, as every municipality, has grown a little more to the progressive side, and that's okay. I mean, that's what most cities and urban areas like that are going. But we're still an overwhelming piece of rural America. We have big cities: Charleston, Mount Pleasant, Beaufort to a much lesser extent, Bluffton to a lesser extent, Hilton Head.
Yeah.
But so you have the cities and the municipalities and their concerns, and then you can go a mile into rural America. I've got great friends who still farm. They don't farm indigo, but they still grow it mainly for conversation. Rice. We have rice fields in Colleton
Yes,
and Beaufort County. Sweetgrass. I noticed your basket. I've got some great friends that still weave sweetgrass baskets. So why do I say all that? We've changed, but yet we're still the same. We're still the same values. We're still the same people. We are embracing folks coming in to our district, kind of like America, having people come in. The immigrants. We've got immigrants coming to our district to make this their home. This is paradise on earth, in my opinion. So it's changed, but it's still the same. Still the same values. I can walk through Johns Island and see some really awesome people. Some may be from one doorstep a lawyer or an accountant, and a mile down the road, they grow watermelons and tomatoes, and they have the same concerns. So I could go on and on about that. This is the best district. I'm big in. I have a NACO, National Association of Counties. I serve on some national committees, and I all the time I just embrace, and I love telling the story of the first congressional district, of what we have to offer, because a lot of places, X county in New Mexico or whatever, doesn't have that. We've got it all. We've got it all.
Let me get back to earlier about what's going on at the border.
Mm-hmm.
Where is your concern when you see those images and videos coming out of those particular locations where people are being held right now?
First of all, the harboring, I don't want to say harboring, but if you come across the border illegally and they put you in the detention centers,
Okay.
and there are many of those, this is nothing new. This has been going on since other presidential administrations.
Sure.
So a lot of what we see on TV, as I have gone through the years, is a lot of half-truths and a little bit of truths, and then there's some truth. Sensationalism by people like AOC and that kind of brood is simply not true. Are there problems? Of course, there's problems. There's problems everywhere. But this is not something that Donald Trump and his administration started. This has been going on. When you go to prison in America, you're separated from your family and you are kept in a cell. Your kids don't get to come in there. So, if that makes any sense, that detention does it need to be, warm blankets and water and food? Absolutely, absolutely. Uh, but I believe that what we are seeing on television and the internet is over sensationalized, and you can do that through emotions and really tug at the heartstring of almost anyone. So yes, there's concern, but I believe it's over sensationalized.
Now, if you were to sit down with Congressman Alexandria Cortez right now, what would you tell her?
What would I tell her about the border?
Yes, sir.
Gosh, there's a lot of things I would tell her. I would first tell her that I would love to debate her on practically anything.
Okay.
With the border, we don't need to over sensationalize that. Because there's so many untruths being told, let's go back to the border. You from the left, me from the right. We'll both video it and let America see. There has been just as many chaplains, border patrol officers, congressmen that have come back and said everything is hunky dory. Then, as like with her saying it's a travesty and they're drinking out of toilets and stuff. Just as many on both sides. Obviously, this sells. Her story sells the news. Their story, it's not really newsworthy. It's not la 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 bang. So I would love to go down there with her and let's film it together and let's bring it back and let people see.
What is the truth that should be told about this?
Well, again, my belief is that people aren't drinking out of toilets. My belief is that there's running water. Yes, there are in prisons and so forth. Never been, but from what I hear, it's a central unit. The toilet's at the bottom, the potable water's at the top, and that's what they do in detention centers. From what I've been told, where I've been able to do my research, not listening to the television, but doing research, I'm being told that those stories are sensationalized, and that it's terrible that we have to cage people, but they're here illegally. I can tell you that other places, if we tried to do this, that or worse would happen. Case in point, I did a medical missions trip to Belize several years ago, and while we were all together and on the border of Guatemala, my daughter was walking to the top of a Mayan temple, and I went into that. It started to rain. I went into the jungle there to a little place where I could get dry. There were two gentlemen, both with machine guns, and struck up a conversation like, "Why are you holding these machine guns?" And they said, "Well, we're watching out for two things." I said, "What's that?" "Jaguars and Guatemalans." And one was a kind of ha-ha, the Jaguar.
Right.
But I asked them, what is it? You have, you're here with machine guns looking out for Guatemalans. They gave me their point of view, and they detain, infiltrators all the time. And it's a no-no. Where there's not a wall between those two countries, they will detain you. They don't have the same system as we do, okay. So they send you back or they keep you in prison. There is nothing going on that is as worse elsewhere. But I would love to go down there and videotape, right alongside someone who says it's terrible. And in today's age with Facebook and other things, why don't they do a Facebook Live? If we do it from our boat on the weekend, do a Facebook Live. Let America see what's really going on, and then make the decision for yourself.
You talked earlier about sweetgrass. If you were to be elected to Congress, how would you preserve this legacy?
Wow, I've had the pleasure of meeting with Congressman Clyburn several times, and I led the Beaufort County push for the Reconstruction era funding, the monuments, and have been proud. We have spent a lot of cash, a lot of time, a lot of money from the federal government and locally, from Mitchellville, Fort Fremont, and there's been other movements up in the northern part of the district. So I think that needs to continue. I support that effort to preserve America's history, and that's from pre-revolutionary times, including the Civil War, post-Civil War, Reconstruction era, and into the beginning of the 19th century and so forth. Even the 20th century, we still have history that we need to preserve and we need to tell. I want to see the state. I would prefer to see the state take an even bigger interest in that. Yes, it requires funding. Everything does. But I'd like to see the state get involved. I still want to see the federal government, through its Department of Interior, to take an interest and keep an interest. Our battlefields, our history, our sweetgrass and the Reconstruction era, that is history that needs to be preserved, and future generations need to know about that. I think it's funny. I have one of my favorite movies. Is called Conrack.
Okay.
And Conrack was made in like '74, starring John Voight.
Oh, yeah.
It's the true story of Pat Conroy, Citadel grad, author, rest in peace. It's the story of his beginning as a teacher, and he was sent to Fusky Island. And there was mass illiteracy, that was a whole nother world. And in this movie, it shows you the story of how that was changed and the love that was shared between two different cultures into one society. And that's what we really are. We are one society that needs to be preserved. And we need to be able to have the conversation about our society, our heritage, without taking offense to it. I think that's so sad that people in some places can't talk about history without getting upset. There's no place for that, and it's strictly about communication. I'm a firm believer that whether you have a problem in your marriage, in your business, whatever, I bet you at the root there's some kind of communication error somewhere. So I'm a big believer in communication.
How do we continue the conversation about the future of the 1st Congressional District?
How do we continue the conversation? What we teach, we just keep talking about it. There are so many issues at hand. People have concerns about immigration, about taxes. They're being taxed too much. Healthcare, which is, this is stepping outside of the 1st Congressional District and taking a bigger look. My position on all of these is that, first of all, the federal government needs to take a smaller role. Healthcare, for example. The federal government doesn't need to be in the healthcare business. The federal government is bad at business. We need to let business handle business. And I have a plan for that. Taxes. The greatest theft to the human race in America is the payroll tax. We need to get rid of that. And I have a plan for that. By changing our tax system, actually being the one that will say, this is what we need to do. This is how we're going to do it. Let's have the conversation about a fairer and flatter taxing system with getting rid of all these loopholes and the top percent and the bottom percent and all this. This is all sensationalized gibberish. It needs to be back to basics. Keeping the people involved, keeping them energized, whether you're in the 1st District or the 7th District, should make no difference. These are things that Americans need to talk about. Jobs. Again, the economy is going great.
Okay.
I know in my own former business, the economy is going so great, finding employees is tough. In Beaufort County recently, we had, it was a Saturday or a Sunday, one of the McDonald's of all places had a sign on the door, "Will open after 12," because they didn't have enough people to come to work. They just didn't have enough. They need so many people, and you can only work people so long. The point of all that is people want jobs. We need to, we need to get, the federal government needs to get out of the education system, but the state and the localities need to up their game. We need to continue to enhance education through not only public schools, but private schools, church schools, home schools, charter schools, pilot schools, whatever. You should be able to have your children educated as you see fit. As a parent, you would be absolutely smarter for what they need than somebody sitting over here in the federal government. I don't want anybody in the federal government to tell me how I need to educate my kids. So all that stuff, Quintin, that will keep this conversation going and going and going.
Where is your plan? Can I see it?
You can go to MikeCovertForCongress.com.
Okay. I
We have all of the platform issues, the big ones. There's always something, and people that know me know that I have an opinion about everything, and we'll talk to anybody at any time for as long as we can. But I tell you, it's when you go to the website or have me come talk to a church or a civic club, or I'll come talk to people that are teeing off at the golf course. It's all about communication, and it's all about talking with people, not to people. For far too long, we have had politicians locally, statewide, and nationally that feel like they have to talk to the constituents. I've never felt that way. I'm a public servant my whole life. My business was to provide people heating and air conditioning. And some of that we gave away for free. My time on council as a public servant, this is a public servant. I'm a public servant.
Okay.
So I want to talk with you. I want to hear what is it that makes you tick. When we call for fundraising, and I call all over the country every day, one of the standard things that I'm talking with people is, tell me your concerns. And I've had several people, Texas and Florida, that come to mind, that have said, you want to hear what I think? Well, absolutely. You may be in Louisiana, but what happens here could have an effect there. Or even better yet, how about this? What's going on there may be something that we could use here. And it's really interesting when you take that approach of not talking to people, talking with them. Have you ever noticed when you go into a restaurant, some of the best waitresses and waiters, when they're taking their order, they'll come down. They'll either kneel down or sit down, and they'll talk to you face to face. Right. I'm no better than anybody else. I put my pants on one leg at a time. And so does he and her and so forth. And that's how we need to talk with people. That's what Mike Covert for Congress is all about. Business, but I understand people, and I'm with the people. I remember coming out of high school, and my nails were full of at the end of the day, dirt.
Oh yeah.
I had the scrapes. I got the calluses. I wasn't born with a silver spoon. I worked, and I worked hard, and I watched hard, and I listened to a lot of wrong, and I listened to a lot of right. And now at 51, I am where I am, but it's because of the people, and the people got me where I am.
Michael Covert, thank you so much for your time, and again, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Love being here.
Thank you greatly.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.